Kochani, witam Was serdecznie na naszym spotkaniu z dr Joe. Cieszę się, że jesteście z nami. Cieszę, że jest Was w sumie tak dużo i z niecierpliwością czekacie na odpowiedzi na pytania, które zadaliście. Chcę dodać, że było bardzo dużo pytań, które nie sądzę, że uda nam się wszystkie zadać dzisiaj, ale one będą czekały cierpliwie na nasze kolejne spotkanie i z pewnością wszyscy ci, którzy zadali swoje pytania, usłyszą odpowiedzi. Jak sami wiecie, mieliśmy niesamowite problemy techniczne, pomimo wszelkich prób, testów, posiadania zespołu tutaj z nami. Niestety nie udało się mieć dźwięku podczas oryginalnego spotkania. Udało nam się złapać nagranie i w momencie, kiedy zobaczycie dr Joe, odpowiada on na pytanie, jak uzdrowić nasze ciało.
Called the autonomic nervous system, and its job is to mobilize energy to deal with that trauma. We have chemical imbalances, we have emotional imbalances, and whether it's physical, chemical, or emotional, when our body is knocked out of balance, there's an innate response that happens in the body through the autonomic nervous system that regulates balance again. The problem with most people is that the majority of diseases that are created in the Western world, actually in the entire world, are the result of behaviors, choices, and lifestyle. Less than 5%, close to 1% of the people on the planet really have a genetic disorder from birth. So then, when we're living in this fight or flight autonomic response, and the majority of people show up in a doctor's office, not so much because of physical stress, although that's common, not just because of chemical stress, but pretty much 8 out of 10 people show up because of psychological or emotional stress. So then if we keep responding and reacting to the problems and conditions in our life, our response to the conditions in our environment when we're having a stress response is actually weakening the organism. So most people think they don't have any control out of that. So the science says that in the short term, you have a threat or a danger, or you can't predict something in your life, or you can't control an outcome, or you have the perception that something's getting worse, and you switch on that survival system, and you're mobilizing an enormous amount of the body's resources for some threat in the outer world, and all of your attention goes on the outer world because that's where the danger is. Now, short term, all organisms in nature can handle that. But if you keep knocking the body out of balance and it doesn't have a chance to autonomically return back to order, that imbalance now becomes the new balance for the body, and now the person's headed for disease because no organism can live in emergency mode for an extended period of time. Now, the body is so forgiving, it's so adaptive that if you have a stress response, you sleep, you eat, you take care of yourself, you sit on the couch for a day, your body's recovering. It's going back into homeostasis. But we can turn on that stress response just by thought alone. We can think about our problems, and we can remember our past. We can predict the worst case scenario in our future. And now we're turning on that stress response just by thought alone. So that means then the science says that the long-term effects of the hormones of stress actually push the genetic buttons that create disease, which means then your thoughts could make you sick. And so most people don't have the awareness that their thoughts are actually producing those responses in their body. And the rush and the arousal of those chemicals people become dependent on so they can get a rush of energy. And the challenge is breaking that cycle. So the body can handle that, believe it or not, if you're in your 30s or in your 20s, it can handle that for years on end because it just needs to sleep. It just needs a few days to recover. But if you're going back into the same environmental conditions and you're reacting to your boss, to your coworkers, to traffic, to the news, you're reacting to memory of the past, then we're mismanaging our attention. And in so many ways, we're mismanaging our energy, because where we place our attention is where we place our energy. So then this kind of arousal that takes place is depleting the body of its natural resources. There's no energy for growth. There's no energy for repair. There's no energy for reconstruction, for metabolism. We've squandered it all for some threat or danger in our outer world, real or imagined. So that's called, in the English language, autonomic dysregulation, which means the autonomic nervous system is no longer regulating and doing what it's supposed to do, and now the body begins to break down. And so many people then can have a physical trauma that can set it off. Some people get chemically out of balance because they're missing meals, or they're overeating, or they're making the wrong choices. Not that I have any judgment on what people eat. However, if their immune system is compromised because they're so aroused from stress, it's just not a time to digest. And so the person then becomes chemically out of balance, and the very food that they're eating takes more energy to break down than the energy they're getting from the food. So there's this kind of spiral downward if the person becomes chemically out of balance. And of course, if the person is reacting to their diagnosis, reacting to everything that's going on in their life, the body never has a chance to recover and get back into balance. So if it's taken years for people to get that way, and it may take some time to move back to balance. Now, if the person was genuinely interested in creating that type of homeostasis, they would consider doing something physical to create more physical balance, whether it's yoga, whether it's Pilates, whether it's acupuncture, massage, chiropractic, whatever it is that helps to restore energy back to the body physically. If the person wants to get more chemically imbalanced, then of course it's a good idea then for them to make better choices, take vitamins, minerals, enzymes, whatever it is, to create pharmaceuticals if it's indicated, to get the body back into chemical balance. But if 95%, 70 to 95% of people that are showing up in a healthcare facility because of psychological or emotional stress, you could have the most perfect diet. You could do all the proper exercise, but if you're living in anxiety and fear, the body never can get back into balance. So emotional components are very, very important. So let's review this. How do we get back into health and balance? So many people want to know how to get healthy or how to heal their body. And I tell them there's a formula that we've discovered in the 10 plus years of all the scientific studies that we've done. And I tell people it's so much more important to learn the formula, because once you learn the formula, the side effect of that is the body moving back into regulation or autonomic balance again. So then so many people are wanting, I want to be healed, I want to be healed, but they're never taking the time to practice and learn the formula. So now review this with me. If a person is sick and is unhealthy, and the diagnosis is anything from cancer to MS to lupus to all kinds of different chronic health conditions, it makes sense then that your personality, which is made up of how you think, how you act, and how you feel, creates your personal reality. That's called your life. So then if your personality is intimately connected to your personal reality, then it makes sense then in order to change your life, you're going to have to change. In other words, if you want a new personal reality, you got to change your personality. Now this is the difficult part, because the word meditation means to become familiar with. So if 95% of your thoughts are unconscious, if 95% of your actions and your behaviors are unconscious habits, if your emotional responses to your coworkers, to your boss, to your friends, to your family, to your in-laws are the same, then some level, the emotions that you experience on a daily basis, whether it's unworthiness or guilt, you're not even conscious of because that's how you normally feel. So then 95% of who we are by the time we're 35 years old are a set of hardwired programs by doing something so many times that the body fundamentally knows how to do it better than the conscious mind. 95% of the person is a subconscious or unconscious program. They're in the habit of being themselves. So then, if you're going to change your personality and because you want a new personal reality, you better start thinking about what you've been thinking about and decide if those thoughts serve you. And if those thoughts that are connected to some past event that keeps producing the same emotions, you're going to have to stop thinking about that past event because that thought is going to make certain chemicals for you to feel the same emotions as if you were in that event. And the body is so objective that it does not know the difference between a real experience that's producing the emotion and the emotion that you're creating by thought alone. So the body's believing it's back 10 years or 20 years ago because you or whoever is making the very chemistry that's reaffirming that emotional state. So then a thought and a feeling, a memory and an emotion, a stimulus and a response is what conditions the body subconsciously into the past. So then to break any conditioning, if you study psychology, they'll tell you inhibition is what breaks it, which means you have to catch that thought before it happens, because if you let that thought slip by your awareness, it's going to have a host of chemicals that make you feel guilty or unhappy or fearful. So to become so familiar with those thoughts that are hardwired in your brain that you have been listening to as if they're the truth, and to come up against those thoughts and be so familiar with them, so conscious of them, that you would not let that thought slip by your awareness unnoticed the entire day. Now, that inhibition process creates discomfort in the body. Why? Because the body is in the known, it's in the familiar, it's in the predictable, it's reliant on that feeling so that at least you can say, I am this person. If you don't have that feeling, then the body's no longer in the known, it's in the unknown. And the body does everything it can to return back to the known. So it starts influencing the mind. Start tomorrow, you're a loser, you'll never change, it's your ex's fault, all of that. And so you come up against that battle where the body wants to serve you a thought that will lead to a choice, that will lead to an action, that will create a familiar experience, that will produce the same emotion of guilt or unhappiness. And people say, oh, this feels more like me. No, that's feeling very, very familiar. So then if you complain and you blame and you make excuses and you judge and you talk trash or you talk poorly about someone else, and all of a sudden you realize that, wow, maybe I've been living with my behaviors as a victim. Wow, that's a moment of reckoning. And now coming up against that means you have to do the exact same thing. You have to observe yourself so well, become so conscious of your unconscious programs that they wouldn't slip by unchecked by you in your waking day. Now, so many people live by emotions because the stronger the emotion you feel from some experience in your life, the more altered you feel inside of you. If the quotient of that emotion changes your internal state, it's natural then you pay attention to what's causing it. And the brain takes a snapshot, and that's called a memory. So people then think neurologically within the circuitry of that experience and feel within the emotions of the past. And now how you think and how you feel is called your state of being. So many people are defined by the emotions of their past, and their entire state of being is in the past. Why? Because if they can't think greater than how they feel, and feelings and emotions are a record of the past, then they're thinking in the past. And if they believe that their thoughts have something to do with their destiny, well, then their future is going to look a lot like their past. So this is the tough one, because the emotion then is usually validated. The person will say, well, I had an abusive partner. I had parents that were alcoholics. Yes, yes, that's all valid. However, what are you going to do now? Like, what's the option? I'll never tell a person to go back to the memories of the past. I'll tell them to overcome the emotions that keep them connected to the past. And the fundamental question then is, if I want to create a new personality and a new personal reality, then does this emotion belong in my future? In other words, if you want to be wealthy, you can't feel unworthy or lack. If you want to feel healthy, you can't live in fear, because fear is going to downregulate genes. So climbing out of the programs and learning how to get beyond them is this work. And so the first part of change is becoming so conscious of your unconscious personality in its habituated state that you don't go unconscious. And that's being in the unknown. And that's no longer signaling the same genes in the same way. Well, the next question is, okay, can I create a new personality? A personality that doesn't have a disease? Well, okay, let's reason this. How would that person think? What thoughts do they want to fire and wire in their brain? And if they could, with intention and with attention, that means being present with those thoughts, could they fire and wire those circuits in their brain and begin to install new neurological hardware? The research shows if you keep firing and wiring by repetition, that hardware will become a new software program. That'll be the new voice in your head that says, Kasha, you can heal. Yes, Kasha, you can live a healthy life. Well, there's no magic there. You installed those circuits. Then if you said, okay, I'm not going to complain, I'm not going to blame, I'm not going to make excuses, I'm not going to judge, I'm not going to talk poorly about someone else. I got that clear in my mind. But before I start my day, how do I want to behave? Now, this is where the rubber hits the road, because now you have to sit down and close your eyes and rehearse in your mind how you're going to be with your children, how you're going to be with your coworkers, how you're going to be in traffic, how you're going to be with your own thoughts. And the act of mentally rehearsing, if you're truly present, the brain does not know the actual difference between the experience and what you're imagining. So now experience enriches circuitry in your brain. So in time, as you install the hardware, new circuitry, if you keep firing and wiring, it becomes a software program. What does that mean? That means you start behaving that way. Why? Because you primed the brain to be in a future state instead of a past state. Now, the research on mental rehearsal absolutely says if you practice it enough times, not only will your brain look like you already did it, but when you're put in a situation, like people who never played the piano before that rehearse playing the piano, at the end of 5 days, they put these people in front of the piano. They never played the piano before, and they can play their scales and chords. Why? They primed their brain for that behavior. So then most people don't want to take the time to do this. But listen, athletes do it, dancers do it, actors and actresses do it. There's so many different examples of people who actually do this on a regular basis. Now, here's the tough part. If you said, I want to train my guilt and my unworthiness and my fear for gratitude, for freedom, for inspiration. Now, here's the challenging part, because most people have been hypnotized into believing that they need a reason to feel gratitude. They need a reason to feel inspiration. They need a reason to feel love. They're waiting for something in their environment to change in order for them to feel that emotion. Well, when things are good in their life, they feel good. When things are bad in their life, they feel bad, which means they're victims to their environment, which means their environment is actually controlling the way they feel and the way they think. So then if they're creating a future, now this is important, and they want to get healthy, and they're waiting for their diagnosis to change to feel the gratitude or the wholeness because now they're healthy, they're living in separation from that experience. They're living in lack. They're living in that emotion of emptiness or whatever it is, to wait for the event to occur to take it away. But if you understand then that in the moment you start feeling gratitude, and we have research to prove this, the moment you start feeling love, the moment you start feeling inspired, and you're teaching your body emotionally what that future feels like before it happens, that's the moment your healing begins. Why? Because the body is still objective. It doesn't know the difference between the experience that's creating that emotion of gratitude or love or inspiration or what you're doing by thought alone. The body is believing it's living in that future reality in the present moment. So then if you could wire this in your brain and every day you got up feeling grateful for your healing before it happened, and you were able to sustain that state, not just do it during the meditation and go unconscious again and be back in fear. You just return back to the old personality. But having the awareness to maintain that modified state of mind and body your entire day, independent of the conditions in your environment, independent of the emotions that have been conditioned into the body as the past or the habit or the program of the future, and independent of time. This is when the body begins to change. And here's the reason. If you study epigenetics, it says the environment signals the gene. Absolutely the truth. But the end product of any experience in the environment is an emotion. So then if you're embracing the emotions of your healing before it's happening, you're signaling the genes ahead of the environment. And genes make proteins. And proteins are responsible for the structure and the function of the body. And the expression of proteins literally is the expression of life. So then the person takes 2 steps forward. Then they react to something, but it's not that they react. I react every day. The question is, how long are you going to do that? Because if you keep that emotional reaction going, your body is back in the past. And you just disconnected to the personality and the personal reality of your future. Done properly, you begin to become familiar with those thoughts. They become more automatic. You become more familiar with those behaviors. You start noticing you're happy for no reason. All of a sudden, you're no longer feeling unhappy or guilty. You're feeling emotions that are literally driving a new set of thoughts and behaviors. And how you think, how you act, and how you feel becomes your new personality. The disease actually is living in the old personality, and we see tumors shrinking. We see chronic inflammatory diseases go away. We see blind people seeing, deaf people hearing, stroke people with strokes that are paralyzed recovering. Why? Because that was the old person. They didn't have to visualize the tumor going away. They just became somebody else. So what we've discovered in closing is that the hormones of stress drive the brain into an aroused state, a specific brainwave pattern called high beta brainwaves. In high beta, the arousal is that you're losing control. The arousal is that you have the perception that things are getting worse. The arousal is feeling like you can't predict the next moment. That's called the unknown. And most people, when they step into the unknown, it triggers that fight or flight response. So then, when you start trying to control everything in your life and you shift your attention from one person to another problem, to another thing, to another place, to another meeting, you start firing all those circuits in your brain incoherently. And that's when the brain starts malfunctioning. That's when it sends a very incoherent message to the body. When you're in that state and you can't run and you can't fight and you can't hide and your heart is racing because the sympathetic nervous system switched on, and you're stepping on the gas and the brake at the same time, the heart starts beating out of order, and energy leaves the brain and energy leaves the heart, and we stop trusting in our future. We stop believing in ourselves. There's no energy in the heart. So when we started discovering that in order for a person to change, all they need is a clear intention, a vision of the future, and an elevated emotion, a heart-centered emotion, that the thought and the feeling is changing the person's state of being. So then, if you're going to put your heart into your future, it better be open and activated. And that particular formula of teaching people how to self-regulate and create heart coherence, and we have data to prove that anybody can do it. Doesn't matter how old you are, how sick you are, how out of shape, what you eat, none of it matters. Whether you've meditated before, none of that matters. You just got to learn the formula on how to do it. So then, when your heart starts thumping in rhythm and starts thumping in order, it begins to drive energy to the brain and causes the brain to get more orderly, more coherent. It's the creative center sending information to the brain for you to start wanting to dream. In other words, you're out of survival. When you're in your heart, the body feels safe enough to move into a state of creation and move out of survival. Now, that takes great effort. It takes a lot of energy, and it takes a lot of awareness to restrain those programs and teach the body how to relax into the present moment. By the same means, we've discovered that when people are under the gun of the fight or flight nervous system, they're narrowing their focus on everything material in the outer world. In other words, the hormones of stress cause us to become materialists that define reality with our senses. Which means if you can't see your future, then it doesn't exist, so why even bother? And so then we get in this state where matter trying to change matter, and we're forcing outcomes, controlling outcomes, fighting for outcomes, competing for outcomes, because we're disconnected from that field. So then if you go from a narrow focus, a convergent focus, to a broad focus or to an open focus, and take your attention off of everything known, everything physical, and broaden your focus and putting on nothing but space, nothing physical. The act of doing that causes the brain to recalibrate, to get more orderly. We have thousands of brain scans to show that people could actually do this. So now, the coherence in the brain, the different compartments that were divided start to synchronize. And when the front of the brain's talking to the back of the brain and the right side's talking to the left, that synchronization is creating more wholeness and the person's starting to feel more like themselves. The autonomic nervous system does what? It regulates back to homeostasis. The heart now is beating in rhythm. The body's feeling safe, and now the internal system begins to strengthen. The digestive system has energy to break down food. The immune system has an enormous amount of energy to make T cells, to cause the body to become immune to bacteria, to viruses, to anything. We have data to prove that just a week of doing this, you would be immune to very serious viruses that are existing in the world. We have groundbreaking proof that says that your body can be resistant to any virus. So then, now that person who does this properly has energy to heal. And if they're working on the present moment and they're taking their attention off the people and the problems in their life, as they begin to lower the volume to those emotions in their meditations, they're going to take their attention off the cause of it, and they're going to start calling energy back to them, and they build their own electromagnetic field. The body has a resource of energy to create a new future. So yes, if it was easy, everybody would be doing it. But it's so important for people to understand when there's brain and heart coherence, you have a Wi-Fi signal. You have a field around your body that makes you feel connected to that invisible field of possibility. And then it's not enough to just do it once. You got to do it so many times. You got to fail so many times. I failed so many times. I went unconscious so many times. The question is, catch yourself. And people think at times when they're doing their meditation, oh, I can't control my mind, I'm doing it wrong. Actually, the fact that you think that you're doing it wrong means you're conscious that your mind is moving all over the place. Every time you become aware that you're doing that, you catch yourself and you return back to the present moment. That's a victory. That's telling your body it's no longer the mind. That's executing a will that's greater than those programs. And yes, so many people would rather turn on their TV or get on their cell phone and text somebody or call somebody. That's what people do. They need something in their outer world to distract them from that feeling that that isn't going away. But on the other side of that feeling, when a person's willing to hang in there and sit in the fire, is their freedom. And I've witnessed transformation on just about every culture, every race, every size, every shape, every sexual preference, every diet. I've witnessed it on so many different types of human beings, and transformation always looks the same. There's a light that takes place behind somebody's eyes when they've actually sat in that feeling and believed that there was something on the other side. And on the other side of that lack, on the other side of that pain, on the other side of that suffering, is their freedom, is their health, is their joy. It's just, we have to be willing to move through it. And we have enough evidence in testimony, people in this work that have done it. And when they stand on the stage and they tell their story, everybody's leaning in because there's truth right in front of them. They're looking at truth. And that's the 4-minute mile. As soon as it's broken, as soon as that layer of consciousness is pierced, that's a footprint for somebody else to slip through. And we've starting to leave a lot of really good footprints, both in our scientific research and in our testimony. That's evidence, and evidence is the loudest voice.
Thank you. Well, I'm so glad you shared all those information with us, because it actually covered a lot of questions in one. Beautiful. Thank you. But with a little bit around healing, there's a quick question. Can we have a healing intention for other people? Oh, well, we can have healing intention for other people, but do we need their soul or their permission for that?
That's a really great question. I think so. I think that there's something that happens that we've witnessed in the 2+ years that we've been running our week-long events, and we've done coherence healing on people. I've witnessed people in our work that received the coherence healing. Tumors disappearing, paralyzed limbs moving, blind people seeing, without ever being touched. They understood the technology of how to change the field. And when you change the field, you change matter. And so I've witnessed that. And the scientists now that are interested in studying our work from prestigious universities in the United States, we sit around and drink whiskey or wine and we just talk about what is it that allows one person to heal and not another. And so they were pressing me a couple weeks ago, and I said, one of the things I noticed is that if people are desperate, really desperate, and they want to be healed, they're so desperate that they're not listening to the fact that they have to change or want to change. Because great leaders in history that have healed other people, charismatic leaders, religious figures, they always said, sin no more. Like, change your attitude, change the way you think and feel, because if you don't, and you return back to that same person, the healing will happen, but you will return back to that same state. Why? Because same thoughts, same feelings, same genes, same biology. So the answer is the person has to be ready. They have to be in such a state of gratitude to receive the healing. And the emotional signature of gratitude is something amazing just happened to you. When something great happens to you, you feel grateful. And so the body's believing that the healing's happening when they're in a state of gratitude. So when we do our coherence healings, I work with the healees in getting them in the right state, that they have to think about what they want to change. If they feel grateful for this opportunity, they're in the perfect state to receive. If they understand what these people are doing, and I can get the entire community of 1,000 people synchronized in the same state, there's windows, there are points, nodal points, where energy lines up. And when it lines up, it's the perfect point for intervention. So yes, the person can say that they want to be healed, But if they're unwilling to do anything to help their healing, then they really don't want to be healed. They want somebody else to heal. They want someone else to do that for them. And that's not the solution. They have to be willing. There's got to be an energy of willingness. And so if the person then is waiting for their healing to occur and they're in that analytical state, then they're separate from the experience in so many ways. So there has to be a willingness from the participant, but by the same means, I can't let the community off the hook, which means the healers got to be on point. They got to get beyond their body. They got to get beyond all the people in their life, all the objects and things, the places and time itself. They literally have to know how to connect to that field, and they have to know how to transmit energy non-locally by opening their heart. So then, our community then of people, there are people in this community that practice that every day, and they're doing it without even being in the presence of the healee. They're somewhere else, that's beautiful, which means they're applying the next level of the quantum model of reality to realize that in the quantum there's no separation. They just need a picture, they need a coordinate. And so the scientists that are discovering what we're doing and seeing it are mystified by watching the outcome that takes place. So there's several variables that have to line up. But the person can say, I want to be healed, but they get so much attention for being sick. They get a parking space that allows them to walk right into the grocery store without having to park 50 meters further away or 30 meters further away. And they're unwilling to give up that because that's more important to them than their healing. They just haven't thought it through all the way. So the person who's willing to step out of the known into the unknown, the person that's willing to be in a state of gratitude for the opportunity to receive a healing, the person who's willing to say, if I was actually healed, how would I live my life differently than I have been living? Let me start thinking about how I'm going to live once I'm healed. That's rehearsal. So there's several variables that happen. But it doesn't always have to happen that way. We've had people show up that were the meanest, most negative, most disrespectful, contracted people, but it was their moment. It was their moment to receive love, and they were so unhappy because they were so sick that they finally surrendered. They finally let go, and the window opened, the door opened, and that energy struck their body in the right way. So while there are certain conditions that line everything up, there's this invisible journey of the soul that's transcendent of my intellect that somehow surprises me because everything lined up and the person was just in the right state of just finally saying, I'm open. And it just takes that kind of surrender that allows possibility to intervene.
Thank you. So I know we have a little bit like 15 minutes of your time. So I would like to really squeeze two questions.
Okay, I'll bring it, I'll shorten it up a little bit.
The one around, there's a lot of questions around energy centers. And for instance, if there are any blockages around energy centers, if I cannot sense the space, but I sense space around some, but not some others. So if you could just elaborate on energy centers and potential energy blockages.
Okay, let me see if I can do this in 5 minutes.
I know.
All right, I don't want to have people think that the energy centers are something so mystical that they can't make contact with them. You're living in a body, and this body is gravitationally organized energy. It's organized light and information that's packed into structure, or at least the perception of structure, the slowest frequency that we can perceive with our senses. And these different energy centers are little circuit boards that are under the control of the autonomic nervous system. And each center has its own energy it emits, its own frequency. Frequency carries information, so it has its own intent or its own consciousness. They have their own glands, their own hormones, their own chemicals, and they have these clusters of neurons that act like individual little brains. And so the majority of people that are living life are having certain thoughts that are making certain chemicals that are taking thought in the form of energy and storing it emotionally in these centers. If you're sexual, overly sexual, or your identity is so much of being a male or a female, if you're angry and you're frustrated and you're impatient and you're hostile, that's energy in the third center. If you're suffering and you're unhappy and you're guilty and you're shameful, that's energy that you're storing in your third center. And it starts to cause more energy to be there that should be moving up to the brain. So where you place your attention is where you place your energy. So just having people becoming familiar with each one of these intimate centers in their body by placing their attention there, they're giving life, they're giving energy to each one of these centers with their own thought. Now, we know that you can't do it in beta brainwave patterns. In beta, you're separate from the operating system. You got to learn how to slow your brainwaves down from beta to alpha. That's what that open focus does. And in alpha, now you're entering the operating system of the autonomic nervous system where you can start programming these. But when you narrow your focus on that energy center, you're putting your attention on matter, on the particle. When you open your awareness to the space around them, you're putting your attention on the wave or energy. And reality is both particle and wave. But most people say, well, I don't really feel anything. Well, how much time have you put into sensing that energy? So if it took you 6 months to start feeling it, it would be worth it. Because when you put your attention in each one of these centers, now listen closely. I'll use the heart as an example. You put your attention in your heart. Okay, you live in fear most of your life. You live in frustration most of your life. You live in antagonism most of your life. Then most of the energy is in the third center, not in the fourth center. So then you say, well, I really can't feel love. Well, that's because you haven't been practicing feeling love. You've been feeling everything else but love. So as you rest your attention in the center and you tune into this beach ball of energy around it, I'm not asking you to feel it with your head. I'm asking you to feel it with your heart. If you were to put your attention in your throat and then become aware of that beach ball around it, I'm asking you to feel that energy not here, but with your throat. When you put your attention in the pineal gland, you're saying that's my target. That's where I want to restore energy. And like filling a gas tank, you're just giving it more energy. Sooner or later, the flower is going to bloom if you keep giving it life, just like any flower. You tune into that energy, and as you tune in and you receive that energy, if you could feel it, if you could notice it, if you could experience it, if you could enjoy it, if you could relax into it, if you could stay connected to it, it's going to create coherence in each one of these little brains, which is going to send a very coherent message to the cells and tissues of the body. Okay, so the person says, well, I have a block in my fifth center. What do? Start telling the truth in your life. Nothing mystical there. I can't really feel my heart. Well, start showing appreciation and love to people around you. Energy's blocked in my third center. Well, stop controlling everything in your life. Oh, I feel like I got a block in my second center. Stop suffering. Stop being a victim. Just start participating in life so that energy can naturally move. Well, it didn't move the first day. Well, so what? How long have you been doing this? 30 years? 20 years? What are you going to do? You're going to put a crystal over one of those things? You're going to put a stone over one of those things and think that's going to do it? You have more power, more resources than that object that you're giving your power away to. So the energy center meditations, and there's 8 or 9 of them now, are designed for energy to naturally move up to the brain. And it's if you practice the first one and you get good at it, the second and third one are symbols so you can refine more specific frequencies. Each one is an evolution, connecting, aligning, opening up, drawing from the field, bringing it down into your body. These are all ways to progress the person's understanding once they master each one of these. So if you can't feel the energy around them, Just keep practicing. It's there. It's not like you have to visualize anything. You just have to become aware of it. And I see them as beach balls. And my heart center beach ball is a big one. My pineal gland center, I have a big beach ball. It's 6 meters wide. Why? Because I want to have a big antenna. So I play with it and I have fun with it. I tune in and I receive. I don't expect anything to happen. All I do is know that if I can align these centers, give energy to each one of these centers, I'll have better hormone secretion, which I do, better chemical balance, which I do, better information in these coherent brains sending more health and balance to the cells and tissues of the body. I have more energy for all of these different systems because I'm taking the time to give the body energy. And yeah, we have people that we've measured that do this so well. They do it so, they're outstanding at it because they've just practiced it enough times that it's what they do when their body's out of balance. And not a bad thing to do to start your day, or not a bad thing to do when you finish your day. Saying your body, okay, I'm gonna get you back into balance before I lay you down. I'm gonna get you back into balance before I start our day. Well, that's honoring the body and giving it life. So we designed them so that people have a tool to create balance without having to rely on anything outside of them.
Thank you, and we're working on having them in Polish relatively soon. So our community.
I just gave the go-ahead this week to have these translated in Polish. So stay tuned. It's going to happen.
Great news. Okay, I will sneak in one too, just quickly. So can the breath work be dangerous for someone who has cerebral brain aneurysm? And also, if vaccine becomes mandatory, how can we protect ourselves?
Wow. Okay, let's start with the first one. If you're doing the breath, the purpose of that breath, to blow all your air out of your nose, once again, is to take that creative energy that sits in your first center. People in history called it the kundalini, the life force that sits coiled up at the base of the spine, the serpent. And with the breath, draw that energy all the way up into your brain. And by coaxing that energy up into your brain, if you do it properly, coordinating your breath with the contraction of those muscles and having the intent of delivering energy to your brain, and you're uncompromising. And you know the way to contract those muscles and coordinate it with holding your breath, energy will move. We have data to prove that. And we have people, by the way, in their 70s and 80s that can do it just as well as somebody in their 20s because they just practiced it and they have great brain scans. The problem with a lot of people when they do the breath is they take a big breath in and then they squeeze and they push like they're purple pushing. And that's not the breath. That could be dangerous for someone who's had a history of high blood pressure or a history of aneurysms because you're increasing a lot of pressure inside that closed system. It is a slow, steady breath, and the contraction of those muscles when you get to the top isn't pushing so hard that you feel like you're going to explode. It's just holding your breath in stasis, in a very not too overdone state, and then it is the pumping of those muscles that you're pushing that fluid up in a very rhythmic way. And as you increase the pressure of that fluid in the brain, it starts compressing the pineal gland's crystals and it begins to activate that radio receiver. Then once that receiver switches on and it becomes electrically activated, the brain starts moving into very high brainwave patterns called gamma brainwave patterns. And now the person's connected. Now the person's super conscious. Now the person's very awake and aware, and the analytical facilities in the brain are suppressed because of the hormones that are released out of the pineal gland once activated. So the key is, just like anything you learn, like when I learned snowboarding 20 some odd years ago, 25 years ago, in the beginning it was no fun. I was working way too hard. I was putting in a lot of energy, and then one day I just went out there and I said, let me just watch everybody do it. Let me just keep watching them. And it became so evident to me that they were effortless. And then it was about just distributing my weight. And then once you figure out how to snowboard, you use 1/100th of the energy you were using just to stand up. And you're relaxed. And well, that's what happens with the breath. If you keep practicing it, I can do it without overexerting any muscle or recruiting any other muscles, but I've practiced it for so many years. So you don't want to over try, you don't want to over intend, you don't want to over push. That's dangerous. But it's a practice of a slow, steady breath through your nose. That breath is pulling the energy out of those centers, and you're following it all the way up to the brain, and you're contracting those muscles. And when you get to the top, you're holding your breath, and those muscles are contracted. Then you're lifting up your pelvic floor. You're pulling in your lower abdomen. You're locking down your core and dropping your shoulders down and straightening your spine, so you start pushing that fluid up. But it's not overdone. It's a coordination. And so we have to practice. And in our week-long events, we do a lot of practice. And when people have this moment where the energy moves, they're pretty excited about the process. Last question. I don't have an opinion about COVID, where it comes from, how deadly it is. I think that in many ways it is a virus, and just like any virus, it has different effects on different people, dependent on their level of health or their level of balance. For example, if a person is living and reacting to everything outside of them, and you say to them, Kasia, why are you upset? I'm upset because of this person. And I'm going to say to you, well, that person's actually controlling the way you feel and the way you think. That means you're a victim to your environment. If you're a victim to your environment, then the environment is weakening you because you're responding to the environment. You will be more prone to anything in the environment, large or small, because your immune system is compromised. Now, if a person is out of balance and they're worried and they're afraid of that virus, then the vaccine would be something that they should consider. And if the vaccine is safe and the vaccine has been proven to be safe, and it's something that make them feel better and take them out of fear, I have no judgment on it. I will say, though, that we've done extensive research, and we have taken people's blood and subjected their blood to a pseudovirus that simulates some of the viruses that are out there in the world right now, some of the more popular ones. And at the end of a 1-week event, when we subject their blood to that pseudovirus, there's a resistance in the cells to be affected by the virus. Now, that means then that person moved out of fear, moved out of anger, moved out of suffering, out of pain, and they were feeling these elevated emotions. How do we know? We've seen their heart rate variability monitors, and they're feeling a tremendous amount of love. And if you're feeling love, you're okay with everything out there. You're less responsive. You're not reacting. You're not judging. You're not responding in the same way. And there's a reboot in the immune system that causes people to become less infected. So whatever your belief is in the cause of the current viral situation in the world, whatever that belief is, doesn't matter. You still have to be able to regulate and self-regulate. That means then the more the person's in wholeness, the more the person is heart-centered, the more the person is in love, is in gratitude, and the more they feel that independent of what's going on in their environment, they're less victimized to the environment, which means they should be less susceptible to agents in the environment that could cause them to be out of balance. So I don't have an opinion either way. I just know that we're all on our journey, and whatever it is that helps people live a healthier, happier life, and helps them, and they believe whatever they need to do, it's our belief then that allows us to make our way in this current world.
Thank you. I feel that there's so much more. Always there is more, as you say. Is there more? Of course there is. And I feel, yeah, that hunger for more. And I believe that our community too. Thank you for this time again. There's many more questions waiting for you, so hopefully I can get to talk to you again soon.
Yeah, let's plan on doing something in 3 months or so, and I'll come back, and I hope I wish everybody the happiest of the holiday seasons. Again, great time at the end of the year to look to see what you love about yourself, that you did really well this year, and be able to vocalize it so you can do it again, and then ask yourself, if I had another year of life, now that I've celebrated all the things that I've accomplished or what I've changed about myself, I'm going to take that into this future, into this new year. And if I had another year to live, and to live it as a hero, as a master of my own fate, well, what would I want to change about myself? What would I want to improve? And then make that something that you revisit every day and remind yourself every day who you're going to be. I guarantee you the overcoming of the old self is the becoming of a new self. And I just want to wish everybody the happiest of holidays. And if you feel love in your heart, so much love in your heart that you have to give, then you're emulating the divine, because the divine is what's giving us life. So Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays.
Thank you. Merry Christmas to you, Dr. Joe. Happy New Year, and we will see you soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for watching. That will be it for today, and I'll see you soon. Thank you.